So we're reading Shantideva's text on Christmas, which we do every year. And one verse in there made me go back to a BBC I was thinking about before and finish it, something I wanted to look into. So the verse in the Bodhisattva's Way of Life in chapter 7 says, "Those who practice should be as attentive as a frightened man carrying a jar full of mustard oil, who is being threatened by someone with a sword, that he will be killed if he spills just one drop." And so I don't know what Shantideva had in mind exactly, but Bhikkhu Analayo wrote a lot about this verse. And in the Theravada tradition, they focus a lot on the mindfulness of the body. And that's what they're pointing to in this set of verses, mindfulness. And here he takes it as mindfulness of the body, which is a topic that has a lot of, there's a lot on it in the Theravada literature, the discourses and the commentaries. And so they interpret this verse as one of the mindfulness of body practices. I see it a little more broadly, but we'll take it from from his perspective, because he's quite a scholar, and the way it's sitting in the set of sutras, it just might be in that section. I don't know. So this is showing a simile of a man who's carrying a jar of oil, and it's just full, and it's on his head, but actually he's walking through a crowd, and the crowd is watching some entertainer, a beautiful girl singing and dancing. This is actually what it explains in the sutra. But this man with this oil on his head is being followed by another man with a knife who's going to kill him if he spills one drop of oil. So to preserve his life, the man is very attentive, right? Think of what he's doing. He's attentive to mindfulness of body. Yes, he's very much paying attention to his body. But I bet he's also paying attention to the people around him, like trying to walk very carefully. And I bet he's not watching the show. So what this is trying to show us is that the benefit of establishing mindfulness. Here in this situation, they're describing it as the present moment mindfulness of the body. And the oil on the head reflects a kind of balance and centeredness that we can accomplish when we are aware of our bodily movements, but also other activities that we do, like our speech. We can have a kind of present, feeling of balance and centeredness in how we speak. We can also lose that. And then the other thing that this verse is talking about is not getting distracted, or sense restraint is another way they say that. In this instance, it's preserving his life, so it's a way to be safe. There are a number of other similes that fill out what this mindfulness is talking about. This is one of the they're talking about the 4 establishments of mindfulness, or the 4 foundations of mindfulness, one being of the body. So another one, they compare mindfulness, again, they relate it to the body, to a strong post. And there are 6 different wild animals that are tied to that post. And each one is firmly bound to this post. And they're struggling to escape, but they can't get away. And so sooner or later, they just have to lie down and relax and chill out. And so they compare this to mindfulness of the different sense doors. You see things, you hear things, all of this. We think things. So all the mental agitation that comes from gratifying our senses is what this one way to look at this. These animals are just struggling to go in all these different directions, just like our senses can pull us around, as can our thoughts. But when you have this kind of mindfulness developed, and I have to say, I do think that mindfulness of the body is easier than the other ones, so it's a good place to start, which is why mindfulness of breathing is often taught first, because it's easier. The object is easier to deal with than like thinking about emptiness, or even the feelings, or or the looking at the mind. So it's easier, and it's a good thing to do. By having this kind of mindfulness, we'll settle ourselves down. Our senses can settle down. But if we don't, we can just be like on automatic. We go just follow anything. And then it's kind of like you're off to the races. And in the one thing the Buddha said about this is that if we neglect, say, mindfulness of the body, then when these feelings arise, and we don't maybe have mindfulness of the feelings, then boom, we are off to the races, because the next thing is going to be attachment, aversion, things like that. So that's the simile of the post. Then there's one where they talk about that a mindfulness of the body can help to be a crucial factor to withstand mental defilements when they come up, the afflictions. And they have these images, like if you imagine like a heavy stone ball and you throw it into some soft clay, it's going to make a dent in it. Or if you have a bunch of dry wood, you can start a fire with that. Or if you have an empty jug, you can easily fill it up with water. So in that same way, afflictions will find an opportunity. In all those situations, there's an opportunity. You can fill the jug. There's an opportunity for afflictions to overpower our mind. But if you have strong mindfulness, then that's well established, then they compare it to like you have a light ball of string and you're throwing it at a door made of heartwood, a very hard door. Or you have wet wood and you can't start a fire. Or you have a vessel that's already brimming full of something. There's no more room for any more water. So you can't be overpowered then by your afflictions, is the idea there, if you hold this kind of mindfulness. So one thing that really spoke to me when I was reading about this was some of the footnotes in this book. And one had this expression that these are like strategies in reality anchoring. I really like that because it just it broadens out what we're doing here. And so it was also described in another way as instead of letting every thought carry you away, that you actually anchor yourself. And here they're speaking about anchoring yourself in the mindfulness of the body. So that's why there are these, and then there are these other similes that are very short ones, but they also kind of fill out the picture of what we're talking about with this kind of mindfulness. One compares mindfulness to a careful charioteer. So that means that as the driver, he's able to monitor and steer these, everything that's going on, the horses, the cart, and the road, and all that, and the people that are around. So in the same way, we can steer the various mental factors that come up in our mind. We can monitor and steer them. So we want to have more of a kind of a careful and balanced supervision of our mind. Of course, all kinds of things come up in our mind. Worldly thoughts come up in our mind, all these things. But if we put effort into this, we can improve and not be overpowered by those, as we've just pointed out. But also, this can help us to develop concentration, which also makes our mind much more powerful. And then another simile compares mindfulness personified by like the gatekeeper of a town. And this one, again, is a kind of careful supervision where the gatekeeper, a messenger is coming with an urgent message for the king. And the gatekeeper's job is to get him to the king as quickly as possible. So in that way, we also can quickly kind of deal with the things that come up in our mind as a gatekeeper. There's another image of a gatekeeper. These are all from the sutras, where it relates to like the defense of a town. And it describes this town as having energy as its troops and wisdom as its fortification. And the gatekeeper's function is to recognize who are the genuine citizens that are supposed to come into this town and who aren't. And they allow some to enter and some not. So that's just like having this well-established mindfulness where we don't allow unwholesomeness to, of course it will arise, but we recognize it and we just like, no, we're not going to hang out with you. And then so it's protecting the mind in that way. So like a guard In that way, that helps us then to work mindfulness in that sense, or this can help us to work with our intentions, our motivations, and our thoughts. And then there's the last one has to do with this idea of practicing the four establishments of mindfulness, comparing it to like a cowherd, a person who herds cows, knowing the proper pasture for his cows. So this is a place where they can grow and develop. And in that regard, sensual pleasures that are unabated would not be a proper pasture. Or there's another example, another simile where they're talking about monkeys and their proper pasture. And there's like the monkey has to avoid being hunted by this hunter. So he has to stay out of the regions where the hunters are. And so wishing to be safe, the monkey has to stay in its proper pasture. And so then the idea is that the proper pasture for a practitioner is this mindfulness. So going back to the original one, because it was written in a text by Shantideva, I think I looked for a commentary on it, and I found one, but it didn't say much more than what was there. But I, in my own imagination, could imagine putting a Mahayana twist on this a little bit. And was thinking like that oil that you're carrying is like this beautiful nectar of our bodhicitta. And we want to carry this from one life to the next. And we need to protect this because, it's not, there's distractions. There's, the dancing and the singing and the show. And then there's the dangers of somebody coming after you. And then there's our own, not being careful in situations and then just getting ourselves into all kinds of trouble. So I like these similes. So maybe, find something in there that maybe speaks to you and then try to remember it now and then.